The fields outside the Carter farmhouse stretched endlessly, swaying in the Kansas wind like an ocean of wheat and tall grass. Daniel Carter had grown up here, chasing fireflies on summer nights, fishing in the shallow creek that cut behind the property, and helping his mother mend the wooden fences that always seemed to break after a storm. For him, this small corner of America had always been both a comfort and a cage. Evelyn Carter, his mother, carried the weight of 40 years with a strange, enduring grace. Widowed at 19, she had never remarried. People in the town whispered about her sometimes, how she was too pretty for her own good, how she never quite looked like she belonged among women who had given themselves over completely to farm life. Evelyn had always been different. Her figure, her quiet confidence, and the way her smile carried both warmth and mystery made her unforgettable to anyone who looked too long. To Daniel, she was both mother and enigma. He loved her deeply. After all, she had sacrificed everything to raise him, balancing 2 jobs and selling vegetables at the Saturday market just to keep him in college. But now, as he was 19 and back home for the weekend, Daniel noticed things about her he had never dared to before. The way she lingered in front of the mirror before heading out in the evenings, the red dress folded carefully in her drawer, the faint scent of perfume she never wore around town. It unsettled him. He wanted to believe she was simply rediscovering a part of herself after years of loneliness. But the late-night messages he accidentally glimpsed on her phone told a different story. Daniel had always assumed his mother was too busy for romance, yet there it was. A man's name he didn't recognize, a message glowing on her screen. "I've missed you." Tonight? His mother's face was unreadable when she set her phone down, humming softly as if nothing was amiss. That night, the farmhouse felt colder than usual. Evelyn's footsteps echoed down the hallway as she prepared to leave, her heels clicking against the old wooden floor. She paused at Daniel's door, smiling softly. "Don't stay up too late, sweetheart. There's leftover stew if you get hungry." And with that she was gone. Daniel sat in the silence of his room, the old clock ticking louder with each second. He told himself not to care, that his mother deserved happiness. But something inside him refused to let it go. He pulled on his jacket, grabbed his keys, and stepped into the Kansas night. The moon was full, and the long dirt road leading into town stretched before him like a promise he wasn't sure he wanted to keep. For the first time in his life, Daniel wasn't chasing fireflies. He was chasing the truth. The night air was heavy with the scent of cut hay and dust as Daniel drove down the long country road, his truck rattling with every bump in the gravel. In the distance, he could still see the faint glow of his mother's taillights disappearing into the dark horizon. He wasn't sure what he was doing. Part of him whispered to turn back, to let her have her secrets. But another part, the restless, aching part, needed to know. The town of Millbrook was quiet at this hour. Storefronts were closed, neon signs in the diner flickered lazily, and the gas station stood deserted under its buzzing fluorescent light. Evelyn's car rolled past the familiar landmarks and turned onto a smaller side street Daniel rarely noticed before. His grip on the steering wheel tightened. He slowed his truck, keeping a careful distance. The road narrowed, lined with maple trees that cast long shadows across the cracked pavement. Then, to his surprise, his mother pulled into the gravel lot beside an old brick building at the edge of town. The place looked abandoned, its paint peeling, windows boarded in places, but a faint glow leaked from the inside. Daniel parked a block away, killing the engine, heart pounding in his chest. He slipped out of the truck and walked quietly through the shadows until he could see her. Evelyn stepped out of the car, her red dress catching the moonlight like fire. Daniel's breath caught. She looked different. Not just like his mother, but like someone younger, freer, alive in a way he hadn't seen before. Then a man appeared from the side of the building, broad-shouldered, slightly balding, maybe in his 50s. He greeted Evelyn with a familiarity that made Daniel's stomach turn. She laughed, soft, melodic, the kind of laugh she never used at home. They spoke too low for Daniel to hear, but the man touched her arm, guiding her inside. The door closed behind them. Daniel stood frozen in the shadows, his pulse drumming in his ears. He had followed her this far, but what now? Should he go in? Should he confront her? Or should he walk away and pretend he never saw? His feet refused to move. The windows glowed faintly, shadows shifting against the thin curtains. For a moment, he thought he heard music, a slow, muffled tune, like something from an old jukebox. And then, just as he leaned closer, a sudden creak of wood behind him made him jump. Someone else was there, watching from the dark. The sound came sharp and sudden, a crunch of gravel shifting under someone's boot. Daniel spun around, his chest tight, his breath stuck in his throat. For a split second he thought it might be his mother catching him spying, but it wasn't. A tall figure stepped out from behind the trees, moving with a slow confidence that made Daniel's skin prickle. In the moonlight, he caught the outline of a younger man, maybe a few years older than himself, wearing a denim jacket and a cap pulled low over his brow. The stranger's eyes glinted as they met Daniel's, sharp and unflinching. "What are you doing here?" the man asked, his voice low, almost casual. But there was something in it that felt like a warning. Daniel's mouth went dry. I was just... He fumbled for words, realizing how guilty he must look, crouching in the shadows outside an old building at midnight. The stranger tilted his head, studying him. Then, with a small smirk, he glanced toward the glowing windows of the building where Evelyn had gone. "She inside, ain't she?" Daniel stiffened. The question cut too close, like a knife twisting. "What do you mean?" he asked, though his voice wavered. The man didn't answer right away. He pulled a cigarette from his pocket, struck a match, and let the flame briefly light his face. His features were rugged, tired, as though he'd lived more than his share of rough nights. He exhaled smoke slowly, eyes never leaving Daniel. "Look, kid," he finally said, "this ain't a place you want to be sniffing around. Folks come here to forget their lives for a while, to pretend they're someone else." Daniel's heart pounded harder. He wanted to demand answers. What was this place? Who was the man with his mother? Why was she here, laughing like she belonged to another world? But the stranger's tone carried weight, the kind that told him he'd better think twice before pressing. The night pressed heavy around them. Crickets sang in the field, and from inside the building came a burst of muffled laughter, followed by the twang of an old country song. Daniel opened his mouth, but before he could speak, the man's expression hardened. He flicked his cigarette to the dirt and ground it under his boot. "Go home," he muttered, "before you see something you can't unsee." And with that, the man turned, disappearing into the shadows behind the building, like he had never been there at all. Daniel stood frozen, every muscle in his body trembling. His mother's shadow moved against the thin curtain, her silhouette close to the man inside. The words echoed in his head, "Something you can't unsee." He swallowed hard, torn between fear and the desperate need to know the truth. His hand lifted toward the doorknob, trembling in the dark. Daniel's fingers hovered over the doorknob, slick with sweat. For a long moment he stood there, the night air heavy against his back, urging him to turn around to walk away, but something stronger pulled him forward, the gnawing need to see, to understand. With a shaky breath he pushed the door open. The smell hit him first, smoke, whiskey, and the faint sweetness of cheap perfume. The room was dim, lit by strings of yellow bulbs drooping from the rafters. A jukebox in the corner spilled out an old country ballad, the kind his mother used to hum when she was younger, before the weight of life seemed to steal her songs. People milled about in groups, some laughing too loud, some bent close in whispered conversations. It wasn't a bar, not exactly. It felt more like someone's barn that had been transformed into a secret club for the town's restless souls. Daniel kept to the shadows, heart hammering, scanning the crowd. Then he saw her, Evelyn. His mother was at the far side of the room, a glass in her hand, her hair loose around her shoulders. She was laughing, really laughing, in a way Daniel hadn't seen in years. Not the tired chuckles she gave at home, but something freer, brighter, almost reckless. And beside her stood the man, the same man Daniel had seen her meet in secret. He leaned close, whispering something in her ear, and she touched his arm lightly, as though it was the most natural thing in the world. Daniel's stomach clenched. It wasn't just the sight of her with another man, it was the way she looked, like a stranger, like someone who had stepped out of the life Daniel knew and into another one entirely. His throat tightened. He wanted to call out, to drag her away, to demand what she thought she was doing. But his feet stayed planted. He was rooted in shock, in betrayal, in the realization that his mother carried a hidden life, one that had nothing to do with him. Then her eyes flicked across the room. For a split second, Daniel thought she had seen him. His heart stopped, but she only smiled at the man beside her, tilting her head back as if the rest of the world had disappeared. Daniel's hands curled into fists at his sides. He had come looking for answers, but what he found was something heavier, something that pressed down on his chest until he could hardly breathe. This wasn't just a secret, it was a fracture, one that could split their whole world apart, and yet he couldn't tear his eyes away. Daniel shifted back a step, pressing himself against the wooden wall, trying to blend into the shadows. He thought if he just stayed still, no one would notice him, but fate has a way of turning even the smallest movement into a spotlight. A chair scraped across the floor. A man near the entrance squinted through the haze of smoke and string lights, his brows knit together as his gaze fixed on Daniel. "Hey," the man called out, his voice low but sharp enough to cut through the music. Heads turned. The laughter dulled. Conversations broke off in fragments. Suddenly Daniel felt every eye dragging across the room toward him. His chest tightened. The air grew heavier. He forced a smile, awkward and brittle. "Sorry, I think I'm lost," he muttered, though his voice cracked halfway through the sentence. A couple of people chuckled, but it wasn't the friendly kind of laughter. It was the kind that said, "We know you don't belong here." The man at the entrance leaned back in his chair, crossing his arms. "Lost, huh? Ain't no one just lost who ends up here." Daniel's palms were slick. He wanted to bolt, just turn and run into the night, let the cold Montana air wash this place from his lungs. But then he thought of his mother across the room. Evelyn still hadn't noticed him. She was caught up in the man's company, smiling like a woman half her age. If Daniel ran now, she'd never know he had seen her. The secret would remain hers alone, heavy and hidden, and Daniel couldn't bear that weight. He took a step forward, the floorboards creaking under his boots. The sound felt deafening in the silence. "Relax, kid," another voice said from the side, this one smoother, less hostile. A tall woman in a leather jacket leaned against the bar, her dark hair falling into her eyes. "He's just a boy, probably curious." But the first man wasn't convinced. He pushed his chair back and stood, his boots thudding against the wood. "Curious can be dangerous. Folks come in here to keep their business quiet. If he's poking around." He let the sentence hang, heavy with warning. Daniel swallowed hard. He wanted to defend himself, to insist he meant no harm, but his throat felt dry as dust. And then the worst thing happened. Evelyn turned. Her laughter stalled, her smile slipped, and her eyes locked onto Daniel's across the room. In that instant, her face told everything. Shock, fear, and something else Daniel couldn't quite name. Guilt, maybe, or regret. The man beside her followed her gaze and spotted Daniel, too. His expression hardened. He stepped closer to Evelyn, his arm brushing hers as if staking a claim. Daniel's stomach dropped. There would be no slipping away quietly now. He had been seen by everyone who mattered, and the walls of this hidden place seemed to close in around him. For a moment, Time froze. Daniel's breath hitched in his chest as Evelyn stared back at him, her hand trembling just slightly on the rim of her glass. The man beside her noticed. He leaned down, murmuring something low into her ear, but his eyes stayed locked on Daniel, cold and assessing. Evelyn didn't respond. She only rose slowly from her chair, her face pale in the golden light. "Daniel?" Her voice was barely a whisper, but it cut through the air like a blade. The crowd shifted, curious now, whispering in low voices. The hostility faded into fascination. A boy stumbling into a secret world was one thing. A son confronting his mother in it, that was something else entirely. Daniel's throat tightened. "Mom," he said, though the word came out rough, broken. Evelyn blinked fast, as if trying to gather herself to smooth the moment into something manageable. "You shouldn't be here," she said quickly, her voice steadier now. This isn't your place." Daniel felt a rush of heat crawl up his neck. His hands shook, not from fear this time, but from a surge of something heavier, betrayal maybe, or the raw ache of disappointment. "Neither is it yours," he shot back, louder than he intended. The words rang against the wooden walls, bouncing in the silence that followed. A few people shifted uncomfortably. The man beside Evelyn placed a protective hand on her shoulder, but Daniel's eyes snapped to it, burning. "Don't touch her," he said, his voice shaking with restrained anger. The man smirked, almost amused. "Kid, you've got guts, but you're out of line." Daniel ignored him, his eyes fixed on his mother. "Is this what you've been doing?" His voice cracked now, softer but heavier. "All those nights you said you were working late, all those times you told me to eat dinner alone?" Evelyn's lips parted, but no words came. She looked away, her chest rising and falling fast, her fingers twisting together nervously. The silence pressed in. Daniel felt the weight of every stranger's stare, but none of it mattered compared to the look on his mother's face. "I thought we only had each other," he whispered, the pain in his voice raw enough to hush even the whispers in the room. Was that a lie, too? Evelyn's eyes shimmered, her face breaking in ways Daniel had never seen before. The strong, steady mother he had leaned on for years looked fragile now, unraveling under the weight of his gaze. But before she could answer, the man beside her spoke, his tone sharp, dismissive. "That's enough. Take the kid outside." Two men at the back shifted, starting to move toward Daniel. And in that split second, Daniel realized this wasn't just about his mother's secret anymore. Whatever this place was, whoever these people were, it was bigger, darker than he had imagined. He took a step back, heart hammering, torn between running for the door and standing his ground. And Evelyn, eyes wide with fear, finally spoke, her voice breaking. "Don't touch him, he's my son." The room went still. The words hung in the air like smoke. "He's my son." The two men froze mid-step, glancing at each other, uncertain now. The crowd, restless only moments ago, leaned back into their seats, the tension settling into a different kind of silence. Curiosity mixed with unease. Daniel stood rigid, his fists clenched, his chest heaving. He didn't know whether to feel relief at his mother's sudden defense or deeper betrayal at everything it confirmed. The man beside Evelyn let out a short, sharp laugh. "Your son? Well, isn't that something?" His tone was mocking, but his eyes narrowed as though calculating. Evelyn turned on him, her voice sharper than Daniel had ever heard it. "Don't you dare!" The man smirked again, leaning back in his chair, but said nothing. Evelyn stepped forward, her heels clicking on the wooden floor, her gaze fixed on Daniel. Her face looked older than it had a moment ago, the weight of secrets pressing hard into her features. "Daniel," she said softly, almost pleading, "you shouldn't have seen this. You weren't supposed to be here tonight." Daniel's throat tightened. "And what is this, Mom? Some game? Some life you've been hiding from me?" His voice broke on the last words, but he pushed on. "Why didn't you tell me? Why did you lie? Her shoulders sagged, as if the truth itself had been waiting to be set free. She looked around the room, the eyes watching her, and then back to her son. "I didn't tell you," she whispered, "because I wanted to protect you." Daniel's eyes narrowed. "Protect me? From what?" Evelyn opened her mouth, but the man at her side cut in, his voice low and dangerous now. "Careful, Evelyn. Some truths aren't meant for kids, or anyone outside this room." Daniel's anger flared. "Don't talk like I'm not standing here. I deserve to know." Evelyn turned on the man, her jaw tight. "He's not a child anymore. He has a right." For a heartbeat, mother and son stood together against the weight of the room. But then Evelyn's gaze flickered, haunted, and Daniel felt his stomach twist. She was hiding something more than just a late-night club or a double life. "Daniel," she said again, her voice trembling now, "please, trust me when I say, it's dangerous for you to know too much." He shook his head, his voice low but firm. "It's more dangerous not to." The man at her side rose slowly, his presence looming. "He's made his choice, Evelyn. If he wants answers, he'll have to hear them all, even the ones that'll break him." Evelyn's face went pale. She looked at her son, then at the man, then back again. Her hands trembled as she reached toward Daniel, not quite touching him, and in the silence that followed, Daniel felt it. The moment his world was about to split open, Evelyn drew in a breath that seemed to scrape against her ribs. For a long moment, she just stood there, her hands trembling at her sides, eyes fixed on Daniel as if searching for the right words. The room was silent except for the faint hum of the old ceiling fan overhead. Finally she spoke. "This place," she said softly, her voice breaking, "isn't just a club. It's a front, a way to keep certain people together under watch, people who made choices, dangerous ones. Years ago, I was one of them." Daniel blinked. "What do you mean, one of them?" Evelyn swallowed hard, her gaze darting to the man beside her, then back to her son. "Before you were born, Daniel, I was involved with a group. We weren't criminals in the way you're thinking, but we walked close to lines we shouldn't have. We took risks, smuggling things, hiding people, making enemies we couldn't fight openly. And when I found out I was pregnant with you, I tried to walk away. I wanted a normal life for you." Daniel's chest tightened, anger and disbelief colliding in his veins. "So all those years you told me we were just ordinary, living paycheck to paycheck. It was because I was hiding you," Evelyn cut in, her eyes pleading. "Every lie, every silence, every night I came home late, it was all for you, to keep you safe." Daniel's voice cracked. "Safe from what? Who?" The man finally spoke, his tone clipped. "From people who don't forgive, from debts that don't disappear, from truths that can tear a boy apart before he even grows into a man." Evelyn shot him a glare, then turned back to Daniel, her hands twisted together, white-knuckled. "You were never supposed to know. If they knew you were mine, if they knew you carried even a piece of my past, they'd come for you, Daniel. They'd use you to get to me." The words hit him like stones. Daniel staggered back a step, his thoughts spinning. For years, he had blamed her for her distance, for her secrets, for the way their home had always felt like it was missing something. And now she was telling him it was all because of him. "You should have told me," he whispered, his voice shaking. "You should have trusted me." Tears welled in Evelyn's eyes. "I couldn't risk it. I couldn't risk losing you." The man gave a dry laugh. "And now he's standing here, staring down the same choices you once made. Like mother, like son." Evelyn turned sharply, her voice low but burning. "No, he's not me. He will never be me." But Daniel wasn't so sure anymore, because somewhere deep inside, past the fear and the anger, a small part of him wondered if this dangerous, hidden world was already in his blood. Daniel sat in silence long after the words left his mother's lips. The club, the shadows on the walls, the low hum of voices in the next room, all of it pressed down on him like a weight he wasn't ready to carry. His mind kept circling back. She lied. She hid everything, and she did it for me. "Daniel," Evelyn whispered, her hands trembling as she reached toward him. "Please, I know this is too much. I never wanted you tangled up in it." He pulled back, his jaw tightening. "But I am tangled up. You don't get to decide that anymore. You kept me in the dark, and now I don't even know who I am. Am I your son or your mistake?" The words cut through her like a blade. Evelyn shook her head, tears glistening. "You are my reason for everything, every lie, every sacrifice. I would burn the world down to protect you." The man leaned against the table, arms crossed, watching like it was some kind of tragic play. "You should listen, kid. She's right. Once you're born into something like this, you don't really walk away. You just buy time." Daniel turned sharply toward him. "And what about me? Do I get a choice? Or am I just supposed to carry her past on my shoulders until it crushes me?" The man gave a half smile. "That's the thing. Choice is an illusion. You either run and spend the rest of your life looking over your shoulder, or you stay, learn the rules, and face it head on." Daniel felt his stomach twist. Two paths stretched before him, neither one promising peace. If he left, maybe he could find the quiet life he always wanted, but the shadow of his mother's past would stalk him forever. If he stayed, he'd step into the very darkness she had fought so hard to shield him from. Evelyn reached for him again, her voice breaking. "Daniel, don't listen to him. You are not bound to this. You're free to build something different, something better. You're not me." But the question gnawed at him, louder than her voice, heavier than the man's cynicism. What if I already am her? His fists clenched at his sides. For the first time, Daniel realized that no matter which road he chose, nothing would ever be the same again. The room had gone quiet, each word still hanging in the air when the sound of tires screeched outside. A door slammed, then another. Heavy footsteps rushed toward the entrance. Evelyn's face went pale. She grabbed Daniel's arm with a force that startled him. "They found us," she whispered, almost too low to hear. Before Daniel could ask who, the door burst open. 3 men in dark coats stormed in, their eyes scanning the room like predators. The one in front, broad shoulders, scar running down his cheek, smirked when his gaze landed on Evelyn. "Well, well, Evelyn Hale, thought you could hide forever?" His voice was like gravel, thick with menace. Daniel's chest tightened. His instincts screamed at him to run, but his feet refused to move. The man beside his mother, the one who had been silent until now, stepped forward, blocking the intruder's path. "This isn't the time," he said calmly, though his hand hovered near his jacket, where a weapon no doubt rested. The scarred man laughed. "Time's up. She owes, and debts don't just disappear." His eyes flicked toward Daniel, curiosity sharpening into something colder. "And who's this? The boy? Don't tell me." Evelyn's body stiffened, stepping in front of Daniel. "Leave him out of this. He has nothing to do with it." But Daniel could feel it. Every gaze in the room shifting onto him like a spotlight he couldn't escape. His secret, his mother's secret. Their whole fragile world teetered on the edge of collapse. The scarred man tilted his head, smirking wider. "Everyone's got something to do with it, especially blood." For the first time in his life, Daniel felt something awaken inside him, not just fear, but defiance. His voice cracked, but it carried. "If you want her, you'll have to go through me." Evelyn gasped, tears streaking down her face. The men exchanged dark looks, their silence heavier than threats. And in that single heartbeat, Daniel realized his choice was no longer a thought, a possibility, or a question. It had been forced upon him. The silence in the room cracked like thin ice. The scarred man stepped forward, his boots heavy against the wooden floor. His eyes glinted with cruel amusement. "You?" he sneered at Daniel. "A kid playing protector? Brave, but foolish." The other two men spread out, one drifting toward the window, the other blocking the door. The man beside Evelyn, the one Daniel still didn't know by name, moved subtly, his body angled in a way Daniel had seen before, in movies, in soldiers, in those who knew violence. "Stay behind me," Evelyn whispered, but Daniel shook his head. His heart was hammering, his throat tight, yet his feet rooted him in place. He couldn't retreat. Not now. The scarred man lunged forward suddenly, his hand darting for Evelyn. Without thinking, Daniel shoved himself between them. The man's arm slammed against Daniel's chest, sending him stumbling back into a table. Pain shot through his ribs, but adrenaline numbed most of it. "Daniel!" Evelyn screamed. The stranger by the wall finally acted, swift as a shadow. He pulled a knife from his coat, its blade catching the dim light. The other intruders reacted instantly, one reaching for a gun, the other drawing a metal pipe. Chaos erupted. Daniel scrambled to his feet, his breath ragged. He saw the scarred man pivot toward his mother again, and before his mind could catch up, his body moved. He grabbed the nearest object, a heavy glass bottle, and swung it with both hands. It shattered against the man's shoulder, sending shards across the floor. The man roared in pain, eyes wild, and shoved Daniel hard against the wall. Stars burst in Daniel's vision, but he stayed upright. His fear had shifted into something else now, a stubborn fire he didn't know he carried. The man with the knife slashed at one of the intruders, forcing him back, while the one with the pipe lunged toward Daniel. In that instant, Daniel realized there was no one coming to save them. No police sirens, no miracle escape. It was them or nothing. And for the first time in his life, Daniel felt a grim clarity settle inside him. He wasn't just defending himself anymore. He was defending the truth he hadn't even fully learned yet, the truth his mother had bled to protect. He braced himself, fists clenched, ready for the next strike. The room erupted in a storm of fists, steel, and raw desperation. The scarred man, blood dripping from his shoulder where the glass bottle had shattered, bared his teeth in rage. Daniel ducked as the man with the pipe swung at him, the metal whooshing past his ear and denting the wall. Fear clawed at Daniel's chest, but something stronger burned beneath it. He lunged forward, tackling the man's midsection. The impact knocked them both to the ground, the pipe clattering away. "Get off me, kid," the man snarled, thrashing wildly. But Daniel held on, teeth gritted, using every ounce of strength in his arms. Across the room, Evelyn cried out as the scarred man yanked her by the wrist. She struggled, her hair falling across her face, her voice breaking with fury. "You'll never touch him, do you hear me? Never!" Daniel's vision blurred with sweat and pain, but her words lit something in him. He twisted, driving his knee into the intruder's ribs. The man gasped, the fight leaving him for a moment. Daniel scrambled up, grabbing the pipe and holding it with shaking hands. The man with the knife, the stranger who'd stood silent until now, moved with terrifying precision. His blade flashed, forcing the third intruder back against the wall. For the first time, Daniel caught a glimpse of his face, calm, cold, trained, not a drifter, not a wanderer, a soldier. "Who are you?" Daniel blurted, his voice cracking through the chaos. The stranger didn't answer. He only glanced at Daniel, and in that look, Daniel felt something shift. Recognition. Not just between strangers, but something deeper. "Daniel, down!" Evelyn screamed. Daniel dropped instinctively, and the scarred man's swing missed him by inches. The pipe in Daniel's hands moved almost on its own. He swung with every ounce of fear, anger, and determination. The blow landed squarely, sending the scarred man stumbling back, stunned. The stranger stepped forward, finishing what Daniel had started. His blade pressed against the man's throat. Silence fell, heavy and suffocating. The scarred man froze, his breath ragged, his eyes darting between the knife and Evelyn. Finally, he spat on the ground. "You can't run from this. The boy isn't who you think he is." Daniel's blood went cold. He turned toward his mother, who stood rigid, her face pale. Her lips parted as if she wanted to speak, but no sound came out. "What does he mean?" Daniel's voice shook, the pipe still clutched in his trembling hands. "Mom, what is he talking about?" Evelyn's eyes glistened, her silence louder than any denial. The scarred man grinned through bloodied teeth. "Ask her, boy. Ask her where you really came from." Daniel felt the ground slip away beneath him. The chaos of the fight had been terrifying, but this truth, was worse. And for the first time that night he realized the danger wasn't only outside, it was inside the very walls of his home. The room still smelled of blood and smoke, heavy and suffocating. Daniel's chest heaved, the metal pipe trembling in his hands. The scarred man's words echoed, poisoning the air. "The boy isn't who you think he is." Daniel turned toward Evelyn. His mother's hands were shaking as she pressed them against her chest. Her eyes filled with tears she had no strength to hide. "Mom," Daniel whispered, voice breaking. "Please, tell me it's not true." For a long, unbearable moment, Evelyn couldn't speak. Her lips quivered as though every word she tried to form cut her from the inside. The stranger with the knife, his blade still at the scarred man's throat, looked back at her with a hard, expectant gaze, almost as if he already knew the truth too. Finally, Evelyn's voice came, thin and broken. "Daniel, I never wanted you to hear it like this. Not here. Not tonight." Daniel felt the floor tilt beneath him. His knuckles whitened around the pipe. "Hear what? Just say it." Her eyes closed, a single tear slipping down her cheek. "You're not my blood, Daniel. You never were." The pipe slipped from Daniel's hands and clattered against the floor. The sound was louder than the fight had been. His mind went blank, then filled with 1,000 memories at once. Her holding him when he was sick, her soft voice humming him to sleep, her tired smile when she worked double shifts just to keep food on the table. All of it real, wasn't it? And yet this truth threatened to unravel it all. I found you," Evelyn whispered, her voice cracking. "You were just a baby, alone, crying in the cold, and I couldn't walk away. I brought you home. I made you mine. I loved you as if you were my own flesh." Daniel's chest rose and fell, his breath shallow. His legs felt weak, as though they could no longer hold him. "So all this time, you lied to me." "I protected you," Evelyn pleaded, stepping closer. Her hands reached for him, but he pulled back, his face twisted with hurt. The scarred man chuckled darkly despite the blade against his throat. "See, boy? She kept you safe, but from what? From who? You'll find the truth soon enough." Daniel's gaze flicked toward the stranger, the man who fought like a soldier, who looked at him with something more than indifference. "Do you know?" Daniel demanded, his voice sharp. "Do you know who I am?" The stranger's jaw tightened. He didn't answer, but his silence was louder than words. Daniel's hands shook, not with fear this time, but with a storm of betrayal, confusion, and a dawning, terrifying realization. The fight wasn't just about survival anymore. It was about identity. The silence after Evelyn's confession was heavier than any scream. Daniel's chest tightened as though a rope was pulling him inward, suffocating. He stared at the stranger, the man who had appeared out of nowhere, who fought with a precision that spoke of training, who had looked at him not like a stranger, but like someone measuring, recognizing. "Tell me," Daniel's voice broke the silence, raw and trembling. "Do you know who I am?" The knife in the stranger's hand didn't waver, but his eyes flickered. He said nothing. "That silence," Daniel pressed, his voice rising with desperation. "It means something. You've seen me before, haven't you?" Evelyn stepped forward, her voice sharp, protective. "Daniel, stop! This isn't the time." But Daniel cut her off. "No, Mom, or whatever you are to me now." The words burned his throat as soon as they left him. but he couldn't stop. You lied. My whole life was a lie, and now this man shows up, risking his life for us. Why? Nobody does that for strangers. So what's the truth? The scarred man on the ground, his breath shallow and ragged, let out a dry laugh. He knows exactly who you are, boy. That's why he's here. That's why he won't let you die. The stranger's grip on the knife tightened. His jaw locked, as if holding back words that threatened to spill out. Daniel took a step closer, his hands shaking. Say it! If you know who I am, say it! The stranger's eyes finally met his, and for the first time, Daniel saw something there. Not indifference, not duty, but sorrow. Deep, bone-deep sorrow. I can't, the stranger said softly. His voice was low, rough, almost breaking. Not yet. Not yet? Daniel's voice cracked. So you do know. Evelyn's breath hitched, her body tense. Please, don't! She was speaking to the stranger now, her voice desperate. Daniel looked between them. His mother, who wasn't really his mother, and this man who carried secrets heavy enough to break stone. Something inside him whispered the truth he wasn't ready to hear. They were connected, all three of them, and he was the missing piece. The question was no longer, who am I? But why have you all kept me from knowing? The night had begun with fear of death. Now, Daniel feared something even greater, the truth of his own blood. The cabin had fallen into a silence so heavy it felt alive. The only sound was the crackling of the dying fire, throwing jagged shadows across the walls. Daniel's fists were clenched so tightly his nails cut into his skin. His voice shook as he demanded, Enough, no more lies. Tell me who I am. Tell me why you came here. The stranger stood still, his broad shoulders tense, the knife in his hand lowering at last. He looked older under the flickering firelight, older and unbearably tired. His eyes moved from Evelyn to Daniel, as though weighing the cost of words. Finally he exhaled, voice rough as gravel. You're my son? The words tore through Daniel like glass. His knees buckled, and he stumbled back as if struck. No, that's... His throat closed. You're lying! You're lying! But the man didn't flinch. His eyes, shadowed and pained, held no deceit. I should have told you years ago, but I was forced out, erased from your life to keep you safe. Evelyn, she took you in when I couldn't. She gave you the name, the family I couldn't. Daniel's gaze whipped to Evelyn, whose tears streamed freely now. Her lips trembled. I swore I'd never let you know. I promised him. It was the only way to keep you alive. Daniel staggered back, his whole body trembling. Alive from what? The man's voice hardened. From them, the ones who killed your real mother, the ones who hunted me for years. I carried blood on my hands, Daniel, and I didn't want it to touch you. The scarred man on the floor coughed, spitting blood, laughing weakly. So the secret's out. The boy's no orphan, just another child of violence. Daniel's chest heaved. The room spun. His world, his entire life was no longer his own. You left me to grow up thinking I was nothing, and now you just expect me to accept this? The stranger's eyes glistened. He sheathed the knife, his voice breaking. No, I don't expect forgiveness. I only want you to know the truth, to choose what comes next. With your own heart, not a lie. Daniel looked at Evelyn, his mother who wasn't, yet who had loved him fiercely all these years. Then at the man who claimed him, whose blood ran in his veins. And for the first time, Daniel realized the truth wasn't a gift, it was a burden. The fire crackled low, smoke curling toward the ceiling. He whispered almost to himself, Then maybe I was never meant to belong to either of you. He stepped back into the shadows of the cabin, tears stinging his eyes, knowing nothing would ever be the same again. Outside, the night stretched endless and cold, and Daniel understood. The real battle wasn't survival. It was learning who he truly was, now that the lies were gone.